The event aims at starting a political engagement process towards a joint global action plan framework for transforming informal settlements and slums globally. To tell us more about this, we're now joined by our colleague Khayelihle Khumalo, who's working with cameraperson Mashudu Ramachela. Very good morning to you both. Kaya, what are you seeing on the ground? Take us through some of the core discussions on the Global Action Plan framework on informal settlements and slums. What is its relevance?
Well, certainly quite a very important session, Desiree. Do you know that this is a global phenomenon, not just only peculiar to South Africa? I mean, the issues of the mushrooming of the informal settlement, it is quite a big challenge for the cities as well, where you do have the concern of rapid urbanization. So this is a session by the UN Habitat to try and look at the solutions, to meet with the member states, to look at what works in some parts of the world, but also some areas as well, to improve, of course, the informal settlement, especially because there is a global action plan to try and accelerate and transform these areas into livable areas, so to speak. But also in the main, there's quite a number of participants, so many ministers from so many countries, but just also civil society as well, very central pillar into this regard. But I'm just going to bring into this conversation the chairperson of the Cities Alliance, of course, that's Prof. Madonsela. Prof, thank you so much indeed. And I would imagine that, first of all, Prof, you do have a first-hand experience of, based on your previous job as a public protector, where you were going into the informal settlements and getting to hear what people desperately need. Do you think this is a very good platform to try and amplify those issues, at the solutions?
Certainly. Greetings, Kaya, and to the viewers. This platform is exceptionally important to drive forward the issue of slums, informal settlements, poverty, and all of the issues that affect this community. It provides us an opportunity to look at what has been done right, where have we dropped the ball, and how do we move forward in a manner in line with what we've just said. Instead of just looking at how do we end slums, we look at right now, how do we give everyone a decent life? Hence they're talking of leave no one behind and leave no place behind.
And just looking at the collaboration that you have perhaps with the metros, with the municipalities, so that they improve their work, the issues of governance, the issue of managing the resources, and many other critical issues. So how is that working out?
Well, it's working exceptionally well. As you know, Kaya, I am a new chairperson of Cities Alliance, but I've looked at the portfolio that the colleagues have been driving, and that's the clear intervention of City Alliance. It's the policy part. How do municipalities learn from each other to craft policies that are evidence-based, that are purpose-driven, and that respond meaningfully to the needs of people? But secondly, how does governance get integrated? Instead of you've got a different policy for informal settlements and another for others. How do you integrate those so that everyone experiences your drive to sustainable development? But thirdly, how do you, as you're moving forward, make sure that in the meantime everyone gets a decent life and nobody is removed from development? That, we saw yesterday, for example, the South African approach. We started seeing a typical shack, which has been horrible for me every time I go to a typical shack. But you could see here that it's a typical shack that now has electricity. To looking at an informal settlement, at a formal settlement that integrates living. And they're trying to make sure that people are living and working and playing in the same spaces, because in South Africa and in many other places, the poor have to travel long distances to work, which exacerbates poverty. But it also exacerbates poverty in that you recycle poverty. In America, they've done something that they call an equity atlas, where you're born determines where you'll end up. Because even the people you look up to as role models are only poor people. Even if you're an artist, the people who can buy your art are only poor people. Whereas if you have an integrated human settlement, then people integrate across color, across class, and all other diversities, and social capital is exchanged between these groups.
All right, Prof, thank you so much indeed for your time, and obviously all the best as you work in terms of making sure that the informal settlements, people there also do get a bit of decent services. And we do know South Africa's Bill of Rights is very clear around the issue of making sure that the provision of housing and many other critical should be really just given to all people across the country. And we know these are very fundamental issues that they'll be explored. And we know during the course of the morning, there'll be a memorandum of understanding signed by the South African government alongside the UN Habitat. They'll be setting up an office here in South Africa to try and establish more synergies and collaborative work, very concerted plans to try and change the living conditions for the people in the informal settlements and the slums as well.
Khaya, very encouraging to see there's movement in this particular very important conversation that's taking place not only in South Africa but globally. Khaya, covering that story about the changing around of informal settlements and slums, just to make sure that South Africans in this specific case have decent living conditions. And of course, we'll continue to talk to Khaya on the show as we look at the different guests that will be coming through on that program to talk about this very important topic.